Hey there, fellow global resistors. Charlie Angus here, the Meidas Canada Network. On today's program, we're going to continue to talk about the pattern, the playbook, the extremist playbook, and how it's being used to devastating impacts in Europe, how it's being used in South America, how it's being used in America, and of course, it is being brought into Canada. And we need to identify that because if you've listened to my speeches, you've heard me talk a lot about the coming storm. And it's going to be an ugly storm, and we're going to talk a bit about that. So let's talk about the next step in the playbook. Well, this week, Pierre Poilievre, the MAGA Maple leader, stood up and announced that the greatest crisis right now is the persecution of Christian people in Canada. Yeah, Canada. In 2025, according to Pierre Poilievre, Christians are more persecuted than anyone else, and he's going to stand up and defend them. Now, lest you think that this is just another part of the idiot blather coming out of Pierre Poilievre's mouth, you need to remember that there's a playbook. They work to a strategy. If it works in one region, it'll work in another. And the division among people by claiming the persecution of Christians has become the well-worn path for creating ugly division and driving people apart all over the world. And we're going to get into that today and explain how that playbook could play out and how to stop it. But before we get to that, I just want to say, I was really moved by the beautiful comments we got on the piece we did on the treaties when we were out in Saskatchewan at Treaty 4 in Fort Capel. It's really important in the work that I do to talk about how we are rooted as people of the treaty and to understand that this colonial project that built the nation of Canada has had a very flawed history. By understanding and coming to terms with that, we move forward and we become a better nation because no MAGA president is going to interrupt this long journey that we're on together between Indigenous and settler people in this country. And we're going to fix a lot of those problems, and we're going to talk about that as part of the frame of what we're doing here. So some of the messages, absolutely beautiful. This is from KJ Shannon. I worked for the Ontario Provincial Police for 25 years and dispatched the Six Nations Police Service. That's the Mohawk communities down near Hamilton. My heart has been with my brothers and sisters for even longer. I hang a red dress at the OPP detachment every year. The red dress is symbolic of the murdered and missing Indigenous women. So thank you, Officer Shannon, for the recognition and the respect you show. This is from Andy. Such important and impactful messaging. Thank you for creating the space for this. I'm from the land of the Cahoyka, the Kaskaskia, the Michigamia, the Peora, and the Tamara, which is called Central Illinois today. Much of my academic career has been centered on tribal sovereignty and all of our relations. It means a lot to see these powerful, heavy topics taking center stage in your work and informing how we move forward together. Thank you. Well, thank you for that, Andy. Here's another one that I just love. I'm a patriotic Canadian who cannot understand the Canadians who claim to be patriots but don't know our history, or worse, are offended at the very idea of learning more of it. I don't love my country because of some sanitized image of John A. Macdonald, our first Prime Minister, or because I need him to have lived a perfect life. I'm not some American trying to teach children that slavery wasn't that bad. That I can stand in the full weight of Canadian history and still love my country doesn't make me less patriotic, and their ignorance doesn't mean they love Canada more. I will say part of what makes the weight of history easier to carry is not just who we are now and who we are working on becoming. It's stories like the ones you've been telling. Our government was inexcusably wrong, but there were people standing up even then. How those treaties were ignored doesn't make me feel better about Canada, but their lesson does. The people can come together and figure out a better path forward with the government should be what we're striving to do today, starting with respecting the treaties that are already in place and respecting their history. That's what makes us a country we can be proud of, even with the weight that's come before. I think that's such a powerful sentiment because I really believe that we've come through this process and we're not finished it yet. We got a long way to go, but we are stronger as a nation for recognizing the damage that we've done because we're going to fix and we're going to make it better. This is a beautiful one. Thank you, Mr. Angus, for giving us a voice. Little story for you. I was at a local bar a week ago and I lost my cool with two MAGA idiots. They were spewing the simple-minded rhetoric of foreign workers taking jobs and gender hating, and I simply lost it, and to my shame, I lashed out. Now, I should let you know I'm blind, but I was ready to throw down with these fools. Thankfully, I was guided to the door before things got ugly. Canada is bigger than MAGA. We are smarter than MAGA. We're better than MAGA. I was a firefighter and a paramedic for 30 years before I lost my eyesight. I treated everyone I came into contact with respectfully, kindly, and with compassion. Everyone deserves respect. That's the Canadian way. I'm not proud of my actions of a week ago, and I will do better in the future. Thank you, Charlie from Saskatoon. And there were so many beautiful comments supporting our friend on the Meidas Canada responses, and it reminds us that we're not alone. We're in this together. We got each other's back. This is Tammy Blake. I'm rooting for you, Canada, that you will have an easier time resisting these MAGA lunatics than we do have here in America. Love to all you Canadians from Northern California. Thanks, Tammy. And from Alberta, we have a very tiny minority of separatists that want to run an anti-democratic fiefdom like Trump, but most of us want nothing to do with those people. I get it. We know how strong Alberta is going to be in the fight against MAGA. In the video, there's a scene where James Dashuk and I found the gates of the old Capel Indian Residential School, and it was a chilling thing to stand in front of those gates, knowing that a child who looked at those gates for the first time, say at age 5, had a harder time surviving in that school than a Canadian soldier did in the Second World War. And that image certainly touched a lot of people. This is Andrew. When you went to the gates, I unexpectedly started sobbing. I can't even try to explain. Just powerful emotions. Thank you for bringing this to light. And from Australia, tears in my eyes all the way from Australia. The moment you walked toward that desolate gate, I knew exactly what I was looking at. The history you related to is identical to that of another case of a Catholic work school in Rockhampton, Queensland. Exposed 12 years ago in the case study 26, St. Joseph's Orphanage near Cull, of the Royal Commission of the Institutional Sexual Abuse by Religious Institutions. The stories of survivors being locked up in the hole for days on end in 35 degrees Celsius heat. The systematic abuse at the hands of priests and nuns was gut-wrenching to many locals, who often abandoned their Catholic faith as a consequence of their self-delusion was being exposed in raw live testimony. We as a country grew a few centimeters tall after that truth and reconciliation process, ending in compensation and parliamentary recognition. Canada will be a lot more united and taller when it concludes the same process. Great episode, Charlie. Thank you for that. A lot of the work I've done over the years have been with the survivors of the residential schools, particularly the horrific St. Anne's residential school in my region. I'll probably talk about that in a future episode. Okay, so let's get down to today's episode. Pierre Poilievre announces that his big priority, while the rest of us are dealing with Trump, the fact that Putin is flying dangerous incursions into NATO territory, while we're seeing more and more the breakdown of the U.S. democracy and the constant threats to Canada's economy. What's Pierre Poilievre's biggest issue? Persecution of Christians in Canada. I know it sounds ridiculous that Canada, basically a secular country, somehow Christians are being persecuted. I grew up in the church. My mom goes to Mass every day. We never talk about anybody being persecuted. The fact that in Canada in recent years we've seen horrific anti-Muslim violence, the horrific mosque shooting, the innocent family that was murdered, driven down by a vehicle and killed in London. We see really disturbing cases of anti-Semitism, of gunfire outside synagogues. A woman recently stabbed here in peaceful Ottawa, older Jewish women. We see that anti-Semitism is on the rise. We see anti-Muslim hate violence is happening everywhere. And yet Pierre Poilievre says the victims are Christians. Lest you think that he's just throwing more crap out there, you need to step back and see the playbook. Now, I know CBC, our national broadcaster, jumped in and they were trying to wade through all the statistics and looking at all the evidence to see what Pierre Poilievre's talking about. Poilievre's not interested in the evidence. This is a play. And he's playing the right extreme extremist right-wing card. What's done in one jurisdiction, if it works, will be brought into another jurisdiction. And using this notion of Christian persecution has become part of the extremist playbook. In Germany, the ADF, the extremist neo-Nazi party, has been driving this false image that when they say Christians, they mean white Germans, are somehow being persecuted. They've launched a call for an international day of recognition of Christian persecution. You watch, conservatives in Canada are going to do the same thing. Just like they launched this crazy Christian Heritage Month last Parliament, and then they went after me relentlessly because I was pointing out how ridiculous it was in a country where, you get Easter off, you get Christmas off, Good Friday. How many other religious groups get that? But anyways, the IDF used this as a dog whistle to drive race hatred. So the IDF sent over one of their top MPs to Canada. And who did she meet with? She met with a number of members of the Pierre Poilievre's caucus. They're all using the same playbook. The playbook is being used in the UK right now, and it is frightening. We're seeing, people wanting to burn down the hostels where migrant families are staying. We're seeing the rage blame. And they're using this issue of somehow it's Christians, i.e. white people, are being persecuted as one of their driving forces. I came across this really fascinating report by the Baptist Church in the United Kingdom, who did an excellent study of how Christian persecution, the notion of this, is being used as a front to drive right-wing extremism. So the Baptists, they're always very precise in their wording. They identified the key factors that you need to see in terms of understanding the playbook. They wrote that this notion of Christian persecution was a cover for so-called cleaning up the moral depravity. Yep. That protecting the, quote, Christian nation meant that they were actually saying the threat was posed by Muslims, multiculturalism, the liberal elite, and then they wrote, insert your own demon here. Yeah, whatever you're mad about, blame it on Christians being picked on. They also pointed out, interestingly, that it was either anti-Semitism that was driving it, or sometimes conversely rampant Zionism. And we certainly see, certainly the Jewish community around the world is faced a lot more uncertainty and fright because of what's happening in Gaza with Netanyahu's war crimes, but that the far right have used the Jewish community again and again. So as the UK Baptists pointed out, this idea of Christian persecution is either a drive for anti-Semitism or for rampant Zionism. Make sense of it if you can, but that's what they've identified, and it's happening. The UK Baptists also say that it's about white supremacy or ethnic and religious nationalism with hostility towards migrants, conspiracism around a variety of issues, including climate change denial, Holocaust denial, anti-Islamic conspiracy theories. And certainly in Canada, we saw during the final days of COVID, all these supposed Christian church leaders and extremists quoting the Bible and driving anti-medical attacks and in fact, now we see that in the areas where we're having huge uptakes in measles and other infectious diseases that were eradicated, they're also happening in areas where religious groups have decided somehow that they're being picked on and they have to defend their lives from the state, medicine, science, knowledge. Now, there's another part of this playbook that's coming into play, and you're seeing it already in Canada. What the far right do once they've established even how ridiculous and remote. I mean, how many people in Britain go to church on Sunday? How many people in Germany go to church? But suddenly we're going to defend all those people who do or do not go to church from persecution because they're white. Same thing in Canada. Very secular society here. But what they do is they create provocation. This is the far right playbook to a T. So recently we saw the far right extremists calling for mass deportations, and they were going to hold a rally in Christie Pitts Park in Toronto. Christie Pitts, if you don't know, if you're not from Canada, this is a park in the center of one of the most multicultural cities in the world in Toronto. But Christie Pitts was where the Jewish community and the Italian Catholic kids came together in 1933 and stopped the Nazis. The Nazi hate groups that were forming in Toronto at that time were stopped in what was known as the Christie Pitts riots. So for the far right to go back to Christie Pitts and repeat the same crap is that they wanted counter demonstrations. They wanted to be attacked. They wanted to play the victim card. It's the same as the provocation we saw with this Christian nationalist singer who nobody had ever heard of before, this Sean Feucht guy. And then he went from town to town, city to city, supposedly singing Kumbaya when what he was actually driving was a Christian nationalist, which is white supremacist hate message, and people rightfully stood up. We don't put up with shit like that in Canada. And lo and behold, there was Pierre Poilievre crying out for the persecution of this guy. The far right rallied around him. They need to create provocation. They need to create division. I'm saying this, my friends, because the storm is coming. The storm is going to be massive disinformation, massive rage against immigrants. I'm already seeing it all over my social networks. People are writing to me about how government is subsidizing refugees so that their kid can't get a job at Canadian Tire. No, ma'am, that's not true. When I was in Parliament, we were desperate in the North to get immigrants into the North because people like your son didn't want the jobs at Canadian Tire or the Food Basics or the other stores. But that's a side issue. We need to identify the storm that's coming so we can call it out. We need to call out Pierre Poilievre. We can't just treat it as like, oh, he's just being crazy. Oh, he's just saying flamboyant things. He's working to a playbook, and the playbook is about division. Why does that matter? It matters because our nation is under threat unlike any time in our past. We need to come together. We're facing a threat of the democratic order around the world. We're seeing the far right on the move. We're seeing the gangster regimes on the move. Canada right now is holding the line. But that line is going to be threatened and it's going to be attacked continually from the inside. So that's why calling the playbook out matters. That's why we're going to continue to focus on it at Meidas Canada and show you how they're using these tactics that have been honed and tried in other jurisdictions to divide us from each other in Canada, because they are not going to divide us. Not on our watch. It's not going to happen. So that's the news for the day. We are going to keep kicking at the darkness until it bleeds daylight. Right, my friends? That's what we got to do. Wherever you are, thank you for your support. If you haven't subscribed yet, hit subscribe on the YouTube channel. It really helps. We're trying to get to 200,000 supporters. If you want to follow my work more closely, you can follow me at Charlie Angus, the Resistance Substack. And just putting it out there, if you want to help us so that we can get on the road and get into communities and start building the resistance at the local level against this kind of right-wing hate, a contribution could help, because it's just a small team of us doing this. info@charlieangus.ca. So, for Meidas Canada, thank you, merci, and make witch.